Well, welcome to a new setting. I'm actually at the end of a road trip right now, and I've been trying to shoot this video all day, and it just has not happened. But I am at the hotel now, and the kids are asleep, so it's time to get this out. There's some really big news, and that's why it's worth doing all this here in the parking lot with the Cybertruck, which is powering all of our devices, which is pretty cool. But Tesla has officially made not just a price change to the Model 3, but there's something really big that just happened. And by the way, real quick, if you hit that subscribe button, you can help me get to that magic 100,000 subscribers. I'm hoping to hit sometime this year. I really appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button. There's now a listing on fueleconomy.gov for the 2024 long-range Model 3, and it's qualified for the full $7,500 tax credit. There's a lot of questions here. I totally understand. I'm going to try to cover all of that for you. But unfortunately, my video yesterday is now null and void because prices are changed and the tax credit now changes the entire equation that I discussed in that video. Not to worry though, I'm going to cover as much of this here as I can and as clearly as I can with the limited setup that I have available to me. So with that, let's take a look at what the heck is going on. I really want to start here first because this is where we're going to get the most detailed information. But if we look at the Model 3 here and we make some changes, let's close that out. You can see now the long-range all-wheel drive does include the $7,500 federal tax credit. And if you scroll to the bottom, it'll show you your design does qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. This is great news. The rear-wheel drive, however, still no changes, so it is still not qualified. The performance, of course, has been qualified since it was re-released earlier this year, so that has never been a question. But now the long-range all-wheel drive is indeed qualified, and this is big. On top of that, Tesla did lower the price by $250 on the long-range all-wheel drive, and it'll make more sense here in just a minute why that is. So with Tesla's setup here, unfortunately, the gas savings are automatically loaded in there, so you think possibly that the price is $35,000. That is not the case. You will not pay that. You need to zero out the gas savings here, and an easy, quick way to do that, just get rid of the mileage, do it for 1 year, and you're all set. So now it'll show you the $7,500 taken off, but will not add any money taken off for fuel savings. So $38,990 for the rear-wheel drive, $39,990 for the long-range all-wheel drive, and $47,490 for the performance all-wheel drive. Now, the crazy thing here is for the performance all-wheel drive, which is an amazing car, I just had a chance to test it out for myself. You cannot add any options of any kind. You can have the stealth gray exterior, and then they will allow you, however, to have the white interior. So they're not going to charge you for the white interior, so that way you can still get whatever interior you want, but no exterior color changes. Otherwise, you will no longer qualify for that tax credit with the Performance Model 3. Now, over here on the Model 3 long-range all-wheel drive, you actually have quite a bit of money to play with here. You've got about $7,500 in options you could add and still be under the $55,000 threshold. So with that, you can go with the Ultra Red if you like, which is really nice. You can add the sport wheels, you can add the white interior, which is a $2,000 option now, and your price at this point is $52,490. You are still under that $55,000 price cap, so you can add any options that you want to the long-range all-wheel drive Model 3 and still be qualified for the full $7,500 tax credit. All right, now real quickly here, let's go over to the Model Y, and this is why things have been so challenging for the Model 3 since it originally came out. So if we go over to cash, we can see all these savings. Let's get rid of $6,000 in gas savings, which is just, oh my gosh, come on Tesla, stop doing this. Let's zero that out. Okay, these are the landed prices. This is what you're gonna pay, assuming your income does not exceed the limits, which I'll talk about in a moment. But with the tax credit, $37,490 for the long range rear-wheel drive, $40,490 for the long range all-wheel drive, and $43,990 for the performance all-wheel drive. These all three have been qualified for the tax credit all this time, The difference is the rear-wheel drive Model Y actually just recently became the long-range rear-wheel drive, and that gives us 320 miles, which is 12 miles more than the long-range all-wheel drive, rather than having a standard range rear-wheel drive. This is important because you will see in a moment when we come back over to pricing, comparing the Model 3 and the Model Y, things get a little bit dicey. All right, so coming over here, looking at the pricing, this is why this all matters. Of course, we have $38,990 for the standard range Model 3, $47,490 for the new long range all-wheel drive Model 3, and $54,990 for the performance Model 3. That's compared to $44,990, $47,990, and $51,490. This is where everything changes. Where previously we did not have a tax credit for the long range Model 3, actually meant all models of the Model 3 were more expensive than all models of the Model Y. That finally has changed as of tonight, because since this now qualifies, we actually have a lower price in the Model 3 version of one of these trims. So with those tax credits, we are now looking at a $1,500 difference still with the rear-wheel drive Model Y, but that Model Y is 48 miles more range, $1,500 less. It's larger, qualifies for the tax credit, but you don't get the refresh. Now, the Model 3 long range, because of that price change of $250, we have a full $500 savings if you go with the refresh Model 3 long range versus the Model Y long range all-wheel drive. So you would get a larger vehicle, but you get 33 less miles of range, $500 more, and you don't get that refresh. So now the Model 3 is actually starting to sound like a better deal. And the performance, of course, this thing is going to be more expensive than the Model Y for quite some time because demand is crazy high. $3,500 less to go with the Model Y. It's a large vehicle, of course, like I've said, but you lose 24 miles of range, and of course, it's not a refresh. So just yesterday, when I talked about the Model 3 versus the Model Y, it made 0 sense, at least financially, to go with a Model 3 over a Model Y. You get a bigger car with a lower price, a significantly lower price, until just last night or today, however this stacks up with when you're actually watching this. But now the long-range all-wheel drive Model 3 is less than the Model Y long-range all-wheel drive. So this is new. This does change that formula. Whereas before, you're trying to justify spending the extra money for the refresh Model 3 versus the Model Y. Now, it's very similar in price, about the same price. $500 difference is very small. You do get a lot of nice new features, but just yesterday, this was $7,250 more expensive to go with the Model 3 refresh in long-range all-wheel drive than it is to go with the Model Y, and that's a hard thing to justify. Now, looking at this, you're in the same ballpark. So we now have all vehicles qualified for the tax credit that possibly could be. The Model X in its standard configuration is qualified, all trims of the Model Y, and 2 of 3 trims of the Model 3, which leaves the awkward question, when are we going to see the standard range Model 3 qualify? This is new, of course, but we knew Tesla was working on this, and the standard range Model 3, or the rear-wheel drive Model 3, is no exception. They are working on this, and it's very likely that we're going to see that also qualify in the very near future. Until that happens, it's $1,000 more to get the long-range all-wheel drive Model 3 over the rear-wheel drive, which gets you premium features on the inside, better stereo, way more range, all-wheel drive instead of rear-wheel drive, better performance. It's a no-brainer. Spend the extra $1,000, get the long-range all-wheel drive. But for Model 3 versus Model Y, it's $1,500 more expensive to go with the rear-wheel drive Model 3, which is what used to be called a standard range Model 3, versus the long-range Model Y in rear-wheel drive. You get nearly 50 more miles of range, a much bigger car. That's a very hard sell. So timing on when we could possibly see the rear-wheel drive Model 3 qualify is unknown, of course, but that really needs to come forward for the rest of this to make sense, because right now it's starting to finally balance out, except for that rear-wheel drive Model 3. So let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts? Are you going to change your order to a long-range Model 3. If you are considering a rear-wheel drive Model 3, it would be a big mistake not to seriously consider upgrading to the long-range all-wheel drive, at least right now. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Are you going to make the upgrade, or are you still sticking with Model Y, or are you just going to wait for the Model Y refresh to come sometime next year? I thank you for joining me, and I can't wait to catch you on the next one.